I want to talk to Alyssa, who's calling in from Oregon. Alyssa, you are live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you just fine. What's going on, Alyssa?
Okay, so sorry, this is my first time calling in to the show. I've been listening to specifically the Atheist Experience for like 5 or 6 years now, but just started watching some of the other shows. So I thought that since it's not so much about theism, it would be more appropriate for your show, and just wanted to call and get your guys' thoughts.
Very cool, very cool. Well, tell us what you want to talk about.
Okay. So I've been a skeptic since I was in high school, and what happened that I'm going to talk about, it's been like over the past few years. It's a bit complicated, but I'll try to keep it brief. When I was
as brief as you can, if you could, that'd be great.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, I know. I'm trying to keep it brief. So when I was 7 years old, my father went missing, and he's never been seen since. He had bipolar disorder, and he had a psychotic episode. His car was found near a trailhead, and that's the last thing we know about where he would have been. So he's been, I think after like so many years, they legally pronounce someone dead, but that's neither here nor there in this conversation. What I discovered later on is that several of my family members and my mother also had consulted with mediums about where or like what might have possibly happened to him. I think it's understandable given the nature of how he went missing. They were kind of desperate for any sort of answers. And the reason I call tonight is because several of the mediums had similar stories about what happened to him, if that makes sense.
Okay.
One of them had like a very specific sort of vision. And like I said, I'm a skeptic, so I don't even know, and I'm highly suspicious of these kind of claims.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
The only reason that they trouble me is because, I mean, it's been like 23 years.
So Alyssa, just to clarify real quick, when you say they have stories, they are about what's happened to him, you mean after he's gone missing, correct? Or do you mean before he's gone missing?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean after.
So, okay. So, can I ask you this then? Because obviously this is a very heavy topic, and I want to make sure I'm very clear that I'm incredibly empathetic to your situation. But what I want to know is, if a psychic is telling you a story about what has happened after these events, where you don't know what has happened to him, what about these stories in any way makes you think that they're telling the truth? Because if you don't know what's happened to him, how could they possibly know too? Right? What's the convincing thing there? I'm curious.
I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
So the reason that they're even somewhat compelling is because they're, like I said, they're consistent, and that to me and my family members was unusual. So I totally agree. And I know about cold reading. I know about a lot of the techniques of mediums and psychics. So the reason it comes up for me though is that, can I just share actually what they
definitely, but just to clarify, it sounds like they're telling at least two, I don't know if there's more than two, but at least two are telling a story. They're both telling stories, and they're both similar in nature. and you think that corroboration is kind of convincing in a way, right? Like I think someone would naturally be inclined to think, oh well, they must be saying something because they're both kind of telling the same story. So I understand that intuition totally. So I can see why that would trouble you, especially with an issue that's obviously incredibly as emotionally charged as this. So let's talk about that. What did they tell you? And is this how many psychics are we talking about here? We talking about 2, we talking about 3, and yeah, give me some details. I'd love to know.
So it's 4 different psychics, and some of them were more specific than others. The first one, my dad's mom, so my grandma, she went to a medium and asked for information about what happened to him, and the medium said that they had a vision of my father standing on a cliff above a lake and then jumping from the cliff into the lake. And presumably that was the last thing that happened for him. And then my aunt in the same city, she was driving around with a picture of my dad, his missing poster, in the back of her car. And someone flagged her down, and they pulled over and talked to her, and the person got out of the car. Not related, as far as we know, to the psychic. I know that's possible too. But she also said that she had a vision of my dad jumping from a cliff into a lake. And then this is where it gets quote unquote spooky. But my mom, she also separately did not know about these visits to mediums or people talking to her. She went to a medium about a year after it happened, and they weren't very specific, but they said that they thought his body was in water.
Okay.
And then, about 5 years ago, my mom was in Louisiana and saw a medium there while she was visiting, and they also said his body was in water.
Okay, so let me ask you this.
I understand that, and sure, go ahead.
Yeah, just real quick. So so they're all talking about something involving water, sometimes a cliff, sometimes that happening. The situation with your father's case, if you don't mind me asking details. When they found this car, was it close to a body of water?
So this was in Arizona, near near the Phoenix area. And so you wouldn't, I didn't, when I heard these stories, I was like, well, that doesn't make much sense. I didn't think there were any bodies of water, but there were within 10 miles, there were a few different bodies of water. And I did find one when I was looking on maps. I found one that had overhanging cliff above the body of water. And my whole reason that I struggle with this sometimes is because I kind of wonder about reaching out to divers to try to see if I could get maybe a volunteer, because there are volunteer diver groups who go looking for remains.
Right.
And I guess the reason why I haven't acted on it though is because I'm very skeptical, and it feels like doing anything like that would be believing in these stories. Which, like I said, as interesting as they are, just So.
They're stories, right? And it's you want to confirm the veracity of them because of the spookiness, right? Because that there's some through lines here. I'm going to talk here for a second, then I want to have Johnny talk because I've been talking a lot on this call. But there is a popular depiction in media of when people go missing that they find themselves in a body of water somewhere, right? Like when missing bodies are found, they're dug up from the ocean or they're coming from lakes and stuff. And it would not surprise me that if you talk to if I went to a psychic right now and I described a fake relative that went missing, I would not be surprised, Alyssa, if they told me a story about them getting lost in a body of water somewhere, right? It's a very dramatic imagery, right? Especially if there's something on a cliff there. And psychics, whether they're intentional or not about their deceptive nature, oftentimes they call upon these intuitions with people. Like they call upon these sort of dramatic tropes that people will play upon, and it sounds more convincing in that state, because we can most people can imagine a situation where somebody might be very desperate and comes to that point. It's obviously all over the place in movies and video games. So, like, to be honest, Alyssa, like, as someone who also would call themselves a skeptic, I think the best explanation for what I'm hearing here is they're just calling upon this trope, calling upon this idea that seems to make sense for somebody who might be finding themselves in a desperate situation. Where do they go? They might go to a cliff. Maybe they go to, if it's not a bridge, it's somewhere else where they can, potentially harm themselves. I think that's what they're going to. And I need to say this too. I am so sorry that these people have told you these stories and have gotten into your head that there may be something to it, because I have very little patience for psychics, very little patience for mediums.
Oh, yeah.
I understand that
a
lot of them think they're doing good, but they're not.
Me.
Yeah, and it's your mom.
Sorry,
it's your mom.
It wasn't me. Yeah.
It sounds like you have a family member that was seeking answers for something, because obviously something traumatic happened and they want to know some answers. And there are people who are saying, hey, I'm willing to give you some answers. And they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. And that, to be honest, that pisses me the fuck off. I hate that for you. I hate that for your mother. And I hate that for you too. It's quite terrible, because even now, when you tell me about the spookiness of these events, I can already kind of maybe figure out that there could be a better explanation for this. And I don't even know you, Alyssa. You know what I mean? It's like how, I'm sure if we looked at other people's stories about missing persons, I almost guarantee that's going to be a through line. But I'm also speculating at my end too. And that's all that we can do, right? We have to speculate unless we can know how the individual methodologies by which each psychic perform their stuff. Obviously there's common through lines, but they're all kind of different in how they do things. Anyway, I'm talking a lot here. Johnny, go ahead. I'm tagging you in, bud. What do you think about all this?
Well, Alyssa, have you heard of James Randi before?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I feel like that's something you can never avoid if you listen to the Atheist Experience.
Yeah.
Matt talks about it a lot. So, yeah. I've heard of it.
Yeah.
He does. James Randi would put psychics and people with who claim to have supernatural experiences and powers in the lab, so to speak, and zero of them could perform under test conditions. This isn't to say, and I say this because honestly, I can't say, this isn't to say that there aren't people who can't see the future or read your mind or be in different places at once. This isn't to say that's impossible. I'm pretty sure they're not. But the fact is, if these people had the ability to do what they claim to be able to do, I think the first thing you'd see is that all of them would be fabulously wealthy, and they would get themselves a gig where they could cash in on it. Now, I suppose maybe these powers only affect the altruistic of us. But the truth is, I think it's just a load of hogwash, and they practice upon people who are in vulnerable positions. I can't imagine what you've been through, Alyssa, for that.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing that they make movies and books out of. And because it really pulls at our hearts to know that can happen to our loved ones. But
yeah,
that's what they want. They want to help, or they want to help
mhm.
themselves to you and what you can give them. So you are a skeptic. This is where skepticism and emotion sort of can clash, because you want there to be an
Right.
answer for something. And I know we always say, we atheists, we skeptical types, we're okay with saying I don't know. Well, yes, sometimes, but sometimes no, we're not okay with it. It's okay to not be okay with this part of your life. You've got to move
Yeah.
on. You've got to
Yeah.
live your life, but it's okay for that to always not sit right. I think that's a human thing. So,
Yeah.
I would.
I mean, I've been
Go
through
ahead,
a lot
Alyssa.
of therapy for this, honestly.
Yeah.
My mom was very proactive, at least, about that. She got me into therapy as
Good.
soon as it happened, and I do thank her for that. And I've also, I also have the same disorder, which is also difficult.
Yeah.
It's not as bad as it is for my dad. I have more just depression than I do any of the manic symptoms for the most part. But yeah, I do struggle with that. I do struggle with wanting to know.
Well,
and for the most part, about like a God claim or things like that, I'm okay with not knowing. But this, I guess, just because it's so much more personal,
right.
Yeah.
it's hard sometimes, especially like anniversaries of like his going missing or his birthday. I'll especially just feel really distressed with not knowing. And it's one of those things that does feel like maybe I could know if.
Well, let me give you a guarantee here, Alyssa.
Let me give you diving groups, but yeah.
I will give you a guarantee here. You ready? This is my guarantee. You're never going to have if your mother ever decides to consult a psychic in the future, they're never going to tell you street names. They're never going to tell you the exact body of water, right? They're never ever going to give you any of these specific details, right? If a psychic could really help
with
this situation, I mean, right. It's like, wouldn't they be able to track all the way down? Couldn't they say, oh yeah, he took a left at this place and took a right here, and here's what he did? No, of course not. Of course not. It's that dramatic imagery again, and I think that preys upon the human emotion that they're going to do. And if you could take any solace in that, and if anybody is willing to fuck with you on that, I would say use that as a challenge. Tell me exactly where he's at. I don't know if that gives you any solace, but obviously, we're preaching to the choir here, Alyssa. I know that you feel the same way that we do about this stuff, but I hope, man, I hope your mother and other people in your family don't have to go to psychics again for this kind of stuff, because the last thing psychics need is more of our money, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Alyssa,
Alyssa, as far as I'm aware, it's sure. Go ahead.
You had said something. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. I do want to say this one thing. You said that you're skeptical with these other things, but this really hits close to home. Something like that. Am I right when you said that?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
yeah.
When you think of all the religious people, when you think of all the people who have fear of death or fear of eternal punishment or fear of never seeing their loved ones again, this is where a little bit of compassion comes in. They're in the same spot. And on some level, they're in the same spot as you. That hits close to home for them. So it doesn't sound like you're not a compassionate person, but those of us watching the show, we got some folks who are big SmackDown fans. People have emotional attachments to certain ideas, certain things in their lives, and so it sounds like you have a point of how you can relate. Now, maybe as you talk to other people who are struggling with things in their life, you can use this as a source of commonality to help them. But yeah, I'm afraid nothing that you said really stood out to me. I'd love to have one of those
and I don't
psychics
expect
call
it
us.
to be convincing to most other people. So
I know.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
'Cause it's not
Alyssa,
even all that convincing to me. At least I struggle with it. So
yeah, for
understandable.
sure. Well, I sincerely appreciate you calling in and telling us about this, because that's a big story, and I imagine that's really hard to tell. So props to you for being able to tell us about it, and thank you so much for sharing, and thank you for letting us talk to you about it. I hope we could at least give you some solace, or at least somebody to talk to about it, if anything. We do need to get to some other callers here, but
Thanks,
again,
Alyssa.
thanks so much for sharing that with us. What a story. Gosh, what a story. Like, that's what I hate about psychics the most. It's like they make you kind of doubt a little bit. Well, what if this kind of thing is real? Right? Like, I'll be honest,
Yeah.
I've never been to a psychic in my life, Johnny. Never in my life. So I don't know what that's like to be in a room and have somebody tell me something that like just hits true to me. But I know enough about psychics to know that they're bullshit. Like, just, well, I am so confident in that. I will bet money with people. I don't know. I will do something to demonstrate that any day of the week. You know what I mean?
I went to a wedding once, and a super sensitive person walked up to me and tried telling me about myself, and a friend of mine who was at the wedding as well, and was trying to read. I'm sensing something. That's about as close. That, and I went to the Scientology Center when I was in Phoenix one time, just for the laughs of it. And I had them do a reading of me, tell me how garbage my life was. I was feeling great, but apparently my life was garbage.
Oh,
And
man.
I'm going to start hurting others. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It's like a psychic.
Well, that sounds like a good time, Johnny. Sounds like a good weekend.